Friends, let us continue our discussion on diffusion and reaction in a solid catalytic particle, and to recap, let us look at what is this catalyst particle look like. So, if you look at this schematic as well as the ACM photographs over here, you will see that this catalyst pellet is made up of pores, but these pores are obviously not straight line pores. There is a tortuous path that reactants have to follow. So, that is one thing that we should keep in mind, and also you can see that more clearly in this cartoon, where it says that you have to follow a tortuous path. So, it is not from one end of the catalyst pellet to another end there is a through and through a single parallel pore. So, that is one aspect. The second aspect is about the size of these pores. Now, if you look at this pore, we are talking about micron size pores, or at times you could have pores which are even smaller than this. So, typical size of a pore may be anything from 10 angstrom to 10,000 angstroms. So, when it comes to diffusion, some other considerations come into picture because the size of the pore is very small, and we will talk about it shortly. So, how do we actually then characterize the pore? There are several quantities of interest which help us characterizing the pore. So, what we are essentially talking about is, this is, let us say, my catalyst pellet, and through this pellet are these pores which are randomly distributed and networked and so on and so forth. And it is this inside of the pore onto which my active material is placed. So, it is that inside area that is what is of importance to me, and some time back I said that to the extent that this external surface area is of little relevance as far as the catalytic reaction is concerned. So, we characterize the catalyst, for example, using surface area per gram of catalyst, Sg. So, that is all this area that we see, that is available inside the catalyst pore per area, and mind you, this value can be significantly high. It can be as high as 100 to 500 meter square per gram surface area. So, that is one quantity of interest. The second quantity of interest is, as you will realize, that this particle which we have shown as a spherical particle is not all solid block. So, it consists of voids through which the gas will flow and the solid material. So, we have voids, and then we have the solid material. So, the catalyst actually consists of both these things. So, the quantity of interest therefore is not the total volume of this catalyst pellet, because if it is a solid block, total volume has no meaning because there is no space for gas to flow. So, what is of importance is the void volume. So, we have void volume Vg, which is all this volume that is available for material to or gases to flow through per gram of catalyst. Okay. Then we have another quantity of interest, rho p, that is the density of the catalyst pellet. P stands for pellet here, and it is important to distinguish it from the density of the solid material which makes the catalyst. For example, if we say that the density of the solid material is rho s, then we will have density of the catalyst. So, how does it work? So, density of the solid is, let us say, rho s, the density of the catalyst pellet. So, when we are talking about pellet volume here consists of both void volume and the solid volume. That actually put together is the pellet volume, and hence the effective density of the catalyst pellet rho p is different than the density of the solid material which makes the catalyst pellet. We then have another important property, rho p, or rather epsilon p, which is the void fraction, and void fraction is nothing but the volume of the void divided by the volume of the catalyst pellet. So, these quantities of course are not completely unrelated to each other. So, for example, we could write epsilon p as mass of the catalyst pellet MP times the density, the void volume. Okay. So, gram of catalyst into the void volume Vg. So, that is the total void volume divided by, let me remove this catalyst . So, Vp divided by void volume plus the mass divided by the density of the solid. So, this is the volume occupied by the solid, and this is the volume occupied by the voids, this is the volume occupied by solid. So, ratio of these two quantities is nothing but my void fraction. So, if you rearrange these terms, we will actually get my Vg is epsilon p by rho p. Okay, epsilon p by rho p. So, these quantities are actually related to each other, they are not completely independent of each other. Another quantity which is of interest when we characterize the pellet is what is the distribution of this void volume. That is, if you look at this cartoon, the radius of all these catalyst pores is not same. So, in other words, whatever is the void volume there, it is not of the same size. So, there is a distribution of this voidage, and this is also important quantity. And for example, in a typical catalyst, you will find there are ways of measuring this void volume by penetration method, that is, you force mercury to penetrate to the catalyst pellet, and the force required or the pressure required is inversely proportional to the size of the catalyst pore, and from that one can get a distribution. So, the first example on the top here, on the x axis is our radius in angstroms, and this is the volume fraction or void fraction. So, it is a typical Gaussian distribution which says that the average size would be somewhere around this particular value over here, and roughly let us say 20 or 30 to 40 angstroms, but there is a distribution. So, there are pores which are as big as about 1000 angstroms, but their fraction is small. There are pores which are as small as 10 angstroms, but that fraction is also small. Majority of them is in this range. But one could also have, depending on how the catalyst is made, a bimodal distribution. For example, in the second case, again same radius on the x axis, the void fraction on the y axis, we see that there are two peaks actually. So, there are pores which are about 10,000 angstroms in the micron range, and there are pores which are about 20 to 30 angstroms. So, this is a bimodal distribution. So, we have macro pores and we have micro pores. So, that is also an possibility. So, this is how we typically characterize the catalyst pore. Now, before we turn our attention to chemical reaction and look at what happens when the reaction takes place, let's look at once again the transport in the pore. Now, when it comes to transport in the pore, there are three different ways in which gas can flow through the pore. For example, bulk diffusion. Now, bulk diffusion arises because of molecule to molecule contact. Now, in a reactor, for example, whose dimensions are in meters, this is a dominant phenomena of diffusion, bulk diffusion. However, when it comes to pore, because the size of a pore is small, there are several other ways which also drive the reactant through the pore. So, for example, the first one that you see over here is a case of bulk diffusion, and this is an common phenomena. If we look at the bulk, that is it's same as whether it's flowing in a reactor or flowing in a pore. And what equation which is shown over here is actually calculating the total gradient or driving force for the material to flow. It has first component which is the bulk flow. So, this component represents the bulk flow. So, the flow is due to molecule contact. But it turns out that if your pore size, for example, is of the order of 10 angstroms or 50 angstroms of that order, then the likelihood that one gaseous molecule will interact or hit the other gaseous molecule. So, molecule to molecule contact is much smaller than the gaseous molecule hitting the wall of the pore, and this phenomena, and therefore, the diffusion which is driven because of contact between the gaseous molecule and the wall of the pore is referred to as Knudsen diffusion. And so the second term that we see over here is a contribution of Knudsen diffusion. Okay, that is primarily because of contact between molecule and gas. Now, how does this come about? Typically, if you consider a gas at 1 atmosphere, so 1 atmosphere, the mean free path L, as it is known as, that is the distance on an average a gas molecule has to travel before it can hit another gas molecule, is of the order of 1000 angstroms. So, if your pore size is in excess of that let us say 10,000 micron, then before there is a good chance that molecule to molecule contact will take place and diffusion can happen. But what about if the size is only 10 angstrom? So, molecule has to travel about 1000 angstroms to hit another molecule, but before it can do that, it will hit the wall, because the wall size itself is 10 angstroms, and hence this what we call Knudsen diffusion. And the Knudsen diffusion is characterized by Knudsen diffusion coefficient, which is given by this formula over here, and this tells us that it depends on the size of the pore R bar, depends on the temperature, and depends on the molecular weight of the species. Notice here we represent Knudsen diffusion as dKj, K for Knudsen and J for the species, and it is tied down to the property of the species Mj. But notice here that it does not involve another gaseous molecule. So, whether it is a multi-component system or a binary system or whatever may be the system, the diffusion is independent of what else is there. That is a characteristic of Knudsen diffusion. The third phenomena by which material can flow, particularly when we are looking at capillaries and pores as capillaries, is that from inlet to the outlet there will be significant pressure drop, and this pressure drop will drive the flow of material through the pore. This is referred to as viscous flow, and using Darcy's law, this can be represented as the pressure driven force through the catalyst pellet. So, we have three different phenomena which drive material through the catalyst pore: bulk diffusion, Knudsen diffusion, and viscous force. This is just like a flow through a tube, but in this case the tube is of 10 angstrom or 100 angstrom. So, pressure drop can be significant, and hence this term which involves pressure drop driven. What you see here as a model of entire diffusion is what is referred to as Mason and Evans dusty gas model, which assumed Knudsen and bulk diffusion in series. So, the actual model used is analogy with the electrical circuit. So, this is your Knudsen diffusion, this is your bulk diffusion, and this is your viscous force, and this is the flow. So, if you take that model, finally we end up with this kind of representation. The point I am trying to make here is therefore that there are various different factors which contribute to the diffusion. This is not the end of the story, because as you can see here, we have represented this catalyst as a single pore, but catalyst of course is not a single pore. It is a pore. Catalyst actually is a combination of different sizes of pores, different orientations of pores, and so on. So, if we once again revisit the diffusion phenomena, this is how diffusion phenomena is influenced when you consider transport in the pellet. For example, if you just consider bulk motion, we can write the flux Nj as minus dJm dCj dZ. That is, this is the driving force and this is the diffusion coefficient. Notice here we use dJm because we do not have binary components always. So, we do not have diffusion coefficient dKj, J and K are two elements, but we saw earlier there is a relationship and equivalent effective diffusion is defined in a mixture. So, J in a mixture. However, there are two complications that arise. One, if you look at the flow direction, normal to the flow direction, not the entire surface is porous. So, there are pores. So, some solid, some pore volume. So, if you want to define the flux in terms of what is happening vis-a-vis the flow, we have to define the flux. See, this is a diffusion coefficient. This diffusion coefficient gets modified and this becomes effective diffusion coefficients. So, difference between these two is this we are assuming a multi-component mixture in a bulk process, okay, bulk diffusion. Here effective diffusion because of two different phenomena. Number one, if you look at the cross section which is now exposed to this flow over here, not entire surface is available for flow. So, there are these void volumes through which only material can flow. So, if we talk in terms of the area available for flow, it is not the entire area, but the void area. So, diffusion coefficient, if you are going to describe the flux in terms of properties of the catalyst pellet, so surface area let us say, this dJm from here has to be modified because only a fraction of this is available for flow, and that fraction is the void fraction. So, dJm gets multiplied by the void fraction. Another modification has to be made because the direction of the flow, that is this x axis as shown over here, is not the actual direction of flow inside the catalyst pellet. For example, inside the catalyst pellet, the material may flow changing directions several times, or in other words, the path that gaseous reactant molecule actually travels is much more than the path as represented by this x axis, that is from this end to this end. So, the diffusion rate therefore decreases because it has to now travel a longer path. And if you are again describing the flux in terms of the major flow direction or the flow direction of the bulk, then we have to introduce another factor tau, which is called tortuosity factor, which is anywhere from 2 to 7 roughly, greater than 1. So, what it means is that the actual effective diffusion coefficient is lower compared to the bulk diffusion coefficient because of two things: epsilon, void fraction, which is less than unity, and tortuosity factor, which is greater than 1. Both these will contribute to this fraction being less than 1, and therefore, the actual diffusion coefficient is something less. So, for example, to give you just an idea, suppose 10 raised to minus 1 was dJm, okay, 10 raised to minus 1 was dJm, epsilon was 0.7 and tortuosity factor was 7, then the actual effective coefficient dJ would be 10 raised to minus 2, whereas the bulk diffusion coefficient is 10 raised to minus 1, almost an order of magnitude lower. This is just an sample example. So, now having got some idea about how the material is moving through this catalyst pellet, let us now turn our attention actually to reaction and diffusion. Okay. So, what we are now going to do is look at a mass balance which is applicable when material is both diffusing and reacting. What we are going to do is we are going to consider only a slab geometry to begin with. So, essentially what we are looking at is a slab geometry geometry, we will start our discussion with first order kinetics. And isothermal situation. So, this will be our base or starting point for analyzing diffusion and reaction. Little later on, we will relax all these restrictions. We will see what happens when your geometry is spherical or cylindrical, or for that matter an irregular geometry. We will see what happens when the reaction is not first order reaction, but general power law kinetics or law of mass action kinetics or Langmuir-Hinshelwood kinetics which we saw earlier. And we will also see what happens if the reaction is accompanied by either release of energy exothermic reaction or absorption of energy endothermic reaction. How so? Essentially non-isothermal case. So, when these effects are strong, what happens? But to begin with, let us consider a slab geometry. So, what we have here is a catalyst of this size, this is the half width. Recall our discussion as catalyst as symmetry. So, we are looking at only half. So, center is my z equal to 0, z equal to L. So, half width is L. On this side is a bulk phase and the concentration is CAB of my reactant. My reaction is A going to B, and we are going to assume that our catalytic material is uniformly distributed through this entire catalyst pellet. This entire catalyst pellet, and therefore, we are now going to set up the mass balance. Z is my axial coordinate. So, I look at what is happening between location Z and Z plus dz. Okay, what is happening during this small cross section. So, we will set up a mass balance on this cross section. This is the outer surface and this is the center. Now, we have seen this earlier. What will typically happen is gas will flow in. We are not considering external resistance as of now, but we will bring that in little later on, something which we discussed at the beginning of this sessions on heterogeneous catalysis. So, the concentration at this point is the bulk concentration CAB, and concentration will decrease gradually as material moves through this porous catalyst. What is responsible for movement of this material? There is a diffusion, but along with diffusion there is a reaction also. So, we will have to account for all these processes. So, let us define few terms. For example, our area, cross sectional area, that is area perpendicular to the flow, is let us say A. Of this A, only Ag is available for material to flow, because that is a void or gaseous void volume. Then diffusivity, we now understand, we are going to say DEA, effective diffusivity. So, we have accounted for all tortuous path and so on and so forth. So, let us write down the mass balance. For a short time duration T plus dt, concentration multiplied by the volume Ag dz. Ag dz is the void volume now. Concentration also defined as moles per void volume. So, this is the mass which is present at time t plus dt, and the same quantity Ca Ag dz at time t that is present at time t, the difference between the two tells me how much mass has accumulated in this cross section, small section of this catalyst pellet. This accumulation is a result of material coming in. It is coming in at z plus dz, it is coming in at z plus dz because of diffusion. So, the flux, that is moles per unit area, is given by dEA dCA dz multiplied by the area A. Remember, while defining effective diffusivity, we incorporated per unit area, cross sectional area, not the void area. That is why we multiplied our dJm by epsilon. So, that multiplies by A. So, this is the moles that are coming in at z plus dz, or molar rate rather, flux rate, and in time dt. So, this is how much has come in. The same quantity evaluated at z is what is going out, and what is generated in this element. If R is the rate of this reaction, then, and we are looking at species A, which is actually getting consumed. So, stoichiometric coefficient times R will be the rate of generation. In this case, stoichiometric coefficient is -1. So, minus R is the rate of generation, or in other words, R is the rate of consumption. So, we just make it minus R for making it in a normal form. So, this is per unit volume of the catalyst pellet, let us say, multiplied by the volume of the catalyst pellet A into dz, that is the moles of A which are generated, or rather rate at which moles of A are getting generated, multiplied by small dt, that is the time interval which we are looking at. So, our mass balance is fairly straightforward. Accumulation is equal to in minus out plus generation. So, putting corresponding terms, dividing by A dz dt, taking limits as dz goes to 0, dt goes to 0, we get the overall mass balance equation, or unsteady state diffusion reaction equation. This quantity representing accumulation, this quantity representing diffusion, and this quantity representing reaction. So, we have a mathematical model of diffusion, or a diffusion reaction equation, unsteady state equation. What kind of equation is it? It is a partial differential equation, time and axial position z, involves void volume, concentrations, diffusion coefficient, and rate of reaction. So, let us look at this equation, but let us look at the solution of this equation, but let us play little bit with this equation, so that we before we move on to looking at the actual results. So, what we have here is dou t of epsilon concentration is dou z of dEA dou Ca dou z minus R. Okay. The first simplification that we are, and this is we are describing a slab, okay, z equal to 0, z equal to L, diffusion and reaction over here. So, what we are going to do? We are going to first make an assumption that we have, as far as this process is concerned, there is a steady state. So, this term goes to 0. So, we have a steady state balance, and partial differential equation now will convert into ordinary second order differential equation, and we will also assume that dEA is constant. So, we will get from this equation, steady state version. So, this is my steady state mass balance equation for diffusion reaction. This diffusion reaction equation incidentally has been used in variety of different ways, not only for catalysis, but for describing diffusion through tissues of our body, diffusion through lung, diffusion through plants. You talk about any process which involves diffusion, invariably there is a reaction, I mean not all, but majority. Lungs for example, oxygen is taken in or diffuses, is released to the various organs, it's kind of a reaction situation. So, we have variety of different use for this. Now, at this point let us bring in that the reaction is first order. Mind you, this mass balance that we wrote, we did not make any assumption on kinetics, that is a general mass balance for a slab geometry. But let us make an assumption that this is a first order reaction. Okay. This is a first order reaction. This is a second order equation. So, mathematically speaking, we need two boundary conditions, and these two boundary conditions are provided by at z equal to L, at this interface my concentration is the bulk concentration. And if you recall, we have a symmetry. So, the gradient at this particular point is 0. So, that condition can also be written as, what it means is that if you have a catalyst which is exposed to the gaseous reactant from all sides, then at the center point material can, if it is a symmetric case, material cannot flow from one region to another. So, there can be crossover, because material is, so suppose this is our full catalyst, material is coming in from here, so there can't be any diffusion across this center point, because if there is a diffusion from here, this side to this side, there will be a counter force to drive material from this side to this side. Net result is no diffusion across this center point, or in other words, the flux at the center is 0. So, that gives me my second boundary condition, that is at z equal to 0, flux is 0. So, these are my two boundary conditions which I will use for solving this equation. So, let me write down those boundary conditions on the side, z equal to L, Ca equal to Cab and z equal to 0. This flux equal to 0 can also be written as dCa dz equal to 0. So, these are my boundary conditions. This is my mass balance, steady state. Now, we would like to look at how does this solution look like, and to see that, let us try to, before we look at the solution with these boundary conditions, let us try to manipulate this equation little bit before we see this solution. The reason for manipulation will become clear in a minute. Now, if you look at these mass balance equations, there are 4 parameters: diffusion coefficient, concentration of bulk Cab, L, that is characteristic of the pellet, and then there is Kv. So, this diffusion mass balance along with its boundary condition involves 4 different set of parameters. This is a characteristic of the pellet, that is the material. This also in some sense is a characteristic of a pellet. This is the characteristic of the reaction, and this is also part of reaction, that is what is the bulk concentration that is present. So, if we now solve this equation as it is, you can expect the concentration A as a function of these values. That is, it will depend on these values of these 4 parameters. So, anytime you change one of the parameters, the other the entire solution will change. But rather than doing this, there is an elegant way of solving this equation by making the equation dimensionless. So, let us try to make this equation dimensionless by saying that I am going to define my axial coordinate z star as z by L. So, z star can go only from 0 to 1, and I am going to call my concentration C A star, or rather let me call it as U, that is a standard notation, U as C A by C A B. So, what I have essentially done by doing this kind of dimensional exercise, I have converted my concentration term into dimensionless concentration U with U between 0 and 1. Similarly, I have converted my axial coordinate Z, instead of in microns or angstroms or whatever units that you want to put it, this also is between 0 and 1. So, my one idea of making these equations dimensionless is that all the order of magnitudes of both these variables are now between 0 and 1. So, when you solve a numerical equation, if that order of magnitude of various terms differ, then you sometimes land up in numerical difficulties. So, this is one way of making sure that numerical difficulties are avoided, because order of magnitudes of different terms is different. Now, if you substitute all this if you substitute this Z star and U into our mass balance equations, we actually get our mass balance equation in the following form: d square U by dz star square is equal to L square kV divided by dAe into U. So, now if we look at this term, look at the term L square kV by dAe, what are the dimensions of this term? Without even checking the dimension of each of these term, we can clearly see the left hand side is dimensionless, d square U by dz square. So, right hand side also must be dimensionless. U is already dimensionless. So, this term must be a dimensionless quantity, and indeed it is a dimensionless quantity, and we call this as Thiele modulus phi, and it is represented as phi square, where Thiele modulus phi square is defined as L square kV by dAe. Now, what is the advantage now? So, our equation is now in a dimensionless form, but more than that, if you look at this equation, which we actually derived from this equation, this mass balance. So, dimensionless form of our reaction equation compared with the same but dimensional form, this had 4 parameters dAe, CAB, L, kV. This has only one parameter phi square. So, by making equations in a dimensionless form, we have actually compressed the parameter range or space into from 4 to 1, and now you can see a clear advantage that if I have, so let me write my phi square over here. So, my phi square is L square kV dAe, let us say its value is 1. If phi square value is 1, irrespective of what combination of L, kV and dAe gave me this value 1, my solution in terms of dimensionless quantities will be identical. So, various different values of L, kV and dAe, all of which result into phi square value being equal to 1, has a same solution in terms of dimensionless quantity. Of course, in terms of dimensional quantities the solutions will differ, but all I therefore need is to solve this equation u. So, u is now only function of phi instead of Ca being function of these 4 variables. So, if I solve it for one value of phi, I have actually solved for several different values of these 4 parameters that we have. What does this Thiele modulus represent? What does this Thiele modulus represent? Now, if we look at this Thiele modulus phi square, which is L square kV by dAe, which I can also write as L square by dAe divided by 1 by kV. Okay, just a small algebraic manipulation. What are units of L square by dAe? L is in, let us say, length scale. So, length scale square divided by dAe. So, let us take typical units. So, this is m square for length and this is, let us say, m square per second. So, what are the units of this? Units of these are in seconds, the numerator. Denominator also must be in seconds. So, these have numerator, both numerator and denominator have time units. So, what time is this? Now, if you look at the denominator first, kV is the reaction rate constant, which has a unit of time inverse. So, 1 over kV is actually the characteristic time of reaction, So, which will tell us how fast, what are the time scales on which the reaction is taking place. By same analogy, L square by dAe, L is actually the diffusion length, is therefore time, characteristic time for diffusion. What does it mean? It means that our Thiele modulus is actually comparing two different phenomena. Diffusion and reaction, and that is natural because these are the two phenomena occurring, diffusion with chemical reaction. So, Thiele modulus is actually the ratio of diffusion time to reaction time. So, now we can qualitatively characterize reactions as follows. For example, if phi is very large, and what is that very large? We will see it in the next session, but if phi is very large, what it means? It means the characteristic diffusion time is very much in larger value than the reaction time. That means the time scale on which diffusion is occurring is much larger than time scale on which reaction is occurring. Other way of putting that would be diffusion is a slow phenomena compared to reaction. So, phi value very large would imply that diffusion is an controlling behavior. Remember our idea that whosoever is slow controls. So, here if characteristic time for diffusion is much larger than characteristic time for reaction, diffusion is a slower process. So, diffusion must be controlling. On the other hand, if phi value is very small or Thiele modulus is very small, diffusion time scales are much shorter than the reaction time scales. That means, reaction is very slow. So, we can therefore see two extreme or limiting cases: Thiele modulus very large, diffusion controlled process; Thiele modulus very small, reaction control process. With this, we will stop for today, and in the next session we will look at how this concentration the diffusion reaction equation, how does the solution look like and what do we get out of all this exercise. What are the actual reaction rates that catalyst particle will follow or the reaction will follow. Thank you.